Stephen C. Foster is known as the father of American music. Today, he's famous for contributing songs like Oh Susanna, My Old Kentucky Home, Camptown Races, and hundreds more to the American folk music library. Foster's songs raked in millions and millions of dollars for music publishers, but he himself died in poverty and in debt. How did they make so much money off of him when he was the one that wrote the music? The answer, my friends, is a business known as music publishing. Hi everyone, and welcome to Music Theories, where I explain and analyze all topics related to music. Be sure to subscribe for more content, especially if you're a music geek like me. And definitely don't miss out on some of the other videos already posted on my channel, and give them a thumbs up if you're feeling generous. Now, Stephen Foster wasn't particularly savvy as an entrepreneur. He sold many of his songs' rights to publishers for flat rates, such as $100 for Oh Susanna, and after hitting financial rock bottom in 1857, he sold all the rights to his future songs to Firth, Pond and Company for $1,900. But his story is sort of the perfect example of how this industry was built up to the size that it was. Today, I want to discuss one topic in particular: Tin Pan Alley. In general, copyright prior to the 1850s wasn't well enforced. Intellectual property was recognized as a concept in the U.S. Constitution in 1787, and though the U.S. Copyright Act was passed in 1790, it wasn't until 1831 that it specified musical compositions as well. I'll be doing a more in-depth video on this very soon, so be sure to subscribe if you want to know more. But for this video, all you need to know is that copyright was not being strictly enforced for musical compositions in the first half of the 19th century. Following the US Civil War, the demand for pianos, and thus the demand for sheet music, skyrocketed. Remember, this was a time before recorded music, so music lovers would either have to play music themselves or go watch someone else perform it if they wanted to hear their favorite songs. Those who had the insight recognized an opportunity to capitalize on this demand. Between 1885 and 1900, New York City grew as the central hub for music performance and music publishing, largely due to the ports in and out of the country on the shores of Manhattan. This gave the city the reach, but also the talent it needed to build an industry. Prior to 1885, plenty of music publishing companies existed throughout the rest of the major cities in the United States. These companies typically operated on a smaller scale and sold mostly light classical pieces or religious hymns. If a local song gained enough traction, it was sold to a bigger New York publishing firm for a decent amount of money. These bigger New York firms, namely Harms Inc. and M. Whitmark and Sons, began to use this demand to maximize their profits. They would concentrate their efforts on the music that was already popular, searching the country for what was new and what was trending, and what would make them the most money. Once they found the music, they would use the marketing tactics to bring even more exposure to that music and music similar to it. However, due to the lack of copyright law enforcement, if a published song was doing well, another company would be able to publish their own transcription of that song with no legal penalty. It was essentially a free-for-all. So publishing firms decided to take this issue into their own hands and make exclusive deals with songwriters, artists, and smaller regional firms directly. They also formed the Music Publishers Association of the United States in 1895, which laid the groundwork for ASCAP in 1914, as well as modern groups like BMI and CSAC. They hired songwriters under contract. These contracts guaranteed the publishing company exclusive rights to any work written by these songwriters, in exchange for a salaried type of pay. It's important to note that much of the time, the songwriters were separate from the business side of things. They would walk into the office like any normal job to write songs every day. While these types of endeavors did curate some of the greatest songwriters of the century, the ultimate objective of these firms was not to create great art. It was to reap the profits from great art. In fact, many of those working in the business of publishing industries were actually former salesmen in various fields, such as clothing, and weren't musical at all. This is the first time we're really seeing music being created through an assembly line style production, likely inspired by the Industrial Revolution. Here is how that process worked. Songwriters would write songs on a regular basis and would be required to submit them to the publishing company. These songs would be reviewed by both the publishing company executives and the performers. If they decided it was good enough to be published, they would do so. And then they would have what were called song pluggers get out into the music stores around the country to play these songs live on pianos set up in the store. They would attempt to expose listeners to these songs and sell as many copies as possible. Patrons could even bring up copies of songs to the plugger for a sample before they bought it. There was a more aggressive method of plugging known as booming, which involved infiltrating a large audience at events, such as sporting events, with members of the publishing company. They would repeatedly sing the songs they wanted to push. Other times, an ensemble would be hired to play in high-traffic events, and they would repeat the same song over and over, sometimes 30 times or more. However, the most effective way the publishing companies plugged songs was by making deals and arrangements with the popular performers of the time to perform the songs they wanted to push. This was a practice known as payola, which was later made illegal. I'll get into that some other time. Pretty clever for the time, and it absolutely worked. Music publishing companies made millions of dollars in the years to follow, and this was the beginning of the pop industry as we know it. Charles K. Harris was one of the first pop artists to publish his own songs under his own name, after he felt shortchanged by the offer proposed by the M. Whitmark Company. This song was the biggest hit of the era, called After the Ball, which grossed over $25,000 a week in 1891 and eventually sold over 5 million copies. And that brings us to West 28th Street in New York City, between 5th Ave and Broadway. Whitmark was the first to settle here, and many followed suit. Before long, there sat a collection of publishers who set up apartments and offices in the buildings on West 28th Street, which became known as Tin Pan Alley. It has been said that the nickname was coined by a journalist named Monroe Rosenfield. However, no article proving that has actually been traced. The origin is unknown, but we do know that tin pan was slang for a dilapidated piano. We can also assume that the sounds of the pianos dancing through the open windows and bouncing off the surrounding brick walls had something to do with it. The term was officially used in an article in Hampton magazine from 1908 titled Tin Pan Alley. While this nickname originally referred to the location, it eventually became a colloquialism for the entire publishing industry itself. The publishing industry stood hand in hand with the vaudeville industry, which was one of the most popular forms of entertainment in America in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Vaudeville shows would travel the country and contained comedy, stunt, theater, music acts, and more. There are also racial pieces of vaudeville that I'd like to touch on another time. But publishing companies dealt with vaudeville entertainers to perform the pieces they wanted to push, and thus helped gain more exposure. When vaudeville came to New York, they'd stop by Tin Pan Alley to shop around for new acts. The music houses of Tin Pan Alley were packed with songwriters, song pluggers, performers, pianists, Broadway performers, and musicians who were all trying to make a living through this new industry. They'd walk into the office like any other job, except in those hours they'd crank out songs as quickly as possible. Aspiring songwriters would come through and attempt to pitch songs with the hopes that they'd get picked up as a staff writer or bought out for a flat fee. Often, songs that were picked up as single songs were published with a co-writer already signed to the publishing company to make sure that the company received the highest royalty rates. Other times, the original writer of the song wasn't credited. Some staff writers that were the most successful ended up establishing publishing firms of their own, such as Irving Berlin, who co-founded ASCAP. Tin Pan Alley produced some of America's classics, including Down by the Old Mill Stream, God Bless America, Happy Days Are Here Again, Give My Regards to Broadway, and Take Me Out to the Ballgame. It's difficult to know just when Tin Pan Alley began to dissipate, but many speculate that it was due to the Depression, or was slowly put out throughout the rise of recorded music, the phonograph, and the waning popularity of the home piano. Bob Dylan claimed in 1985 that Tin Pan Alley was gone because of people like him, who were able to write and record their own songs. However, that wasn't the end of publishing as an industry. It was only the beginning of the music industry as we know it. But more on that to come. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and perhaps subscribe. If you really liked this video, hit the notification bell so you're the first to be notified when I release the next video. As always, thank you so much for watching.